The wind off Lake Geneva sliced through my second-hand coat like it resented poor people existing in this part of the city. I'd been standing outside the Bellarive Club for 40 minutes, waiting for the service entrance supervisor to finish his cigarette and unlock the door. My shift didn't start for another 20, but the tram schedule and my bank account had conspired to strand me early in the cold. Inside, chandeliers warmed women in silk. Outside, I counted my breath clouds and thought about Nana's heating bill. When the door finally opened, I slipped into the humid warmth of the kitchen corridor. Steam from industrial dishwashers kissed my frozen cheeks. I shoved my coat into a locker too small for it and tied on the crisp white apron that somehow always smelled like bleach and someone else's perfume. The floor manager, Claudette, severe and efficient, handed me a tray schedule without looking at my face. "VIP section tonight, Sira," she said. My name is actually Sira Kowalski, though most people here just called me the Polish girl when they needed someone who wouldn't complain about split shifts. Minimal interaction. Glasses, canapes, clear the empties. Do not engage unless spoken to. I nodded. The VIP section paid the same as the main floor, but tips could be unpredictable, either extraordinary or invisible. I'd learned that wealthy people tipped based on mood, not service, and their moods were as foreign to me as their watch brands. The first hour blurred into the practiced choreography of invisible labor. I floated between marble tables, replacing champagne flutes, offering tiny architectural pastries that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The room hummed with French, English, Italian, languages that sounded like wealth even when discussing mundane things. I kept my eyes down, my movements efficient, my expression pleasant and blank. Then the room's temperature changed. I felt it before I saw him, a shift in attention, like a searchlight sweeping across dark water. Conversations didn't stop, but they recalibrated. Postures straightened. Three men in dark suits materialized near the private elevator, and a fourth man stepped into the VIP lounge. He wore charcoal gray that fit like armor, and he moved through the space as if he designed it, which I learned later from a kitchen whisper he had. Matteo Ravenna, owner, not just of the club but of half the commercial properties along this stretch of waterfront. The whispers used other words too: connected, careful, untouchable. I was refilling a water glass when his gaze landed on me. Not a sweep, a focus. It lasted 3 seconds, maybe 4, and I felt it like heat on skin. Then his attention moved on and I exhaled. My phone buzzed against my hip. I ignored it. It buzzed again, insistent, the pattern that meant the hospital. My hand steadied the tray through pure muscle memory, but my heart kicked against my ribs. "Excuse me," I murmured to Claudette, already moving toward the service hall. The corridor was blessedly empty. I pulled out my phone, and the words on the screen blurred. "Pani Kowalski's condition has declined. Please come immediately." I called back, fingers shaking, and when the nurse answered, I forgot everything except urgency. The words poured out in Polish, rapid, desperate, the language of my childhood and panic. "Jak ziekuteli, CZY must piarzyć teraz, pros powiedz me. Miss Kowalski." I spun. Matteo Ravenna stood 3 meters away, hands in pockets, expression unreadable. My throat closed. "I'm sorry, I'll return to." "Your grandmother?" he asked in perfect Polish. His accent was Italian-inflected but fluent, practiced. "The hospital." The shock of hearing my language in his mouth held me frozen. "Yes," I managed. "Finish your shift," he said, still in Polish, and started to turn. "I can't." The words escaped before caution could catch them. "I mean I will, but she doesn't have anyone else, and if tonight is—" I stopped, humiliated by my own transparency. He studied me for a moment that stretched like wire. Then he said something into his phone, Italian, too quick for me to parse, and pocketed it. "Claudette will arrange coverage. My driver will take you. Go." "I can't accept." "You already are." Not unkind, just factual. He produced a business card from his inner pocket, held it between two fingers. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. my office, 10th floor. I took the card because refusing felt more dangerous than accepting. His fingers brushed mine, warm against my cold skin, and then he was gone, dissolved back into the VIP glow. 30 minutes later, I sat in the back of a sedan that smelled like leather and expensive cologne, watching Geneva's lights blur past the window. The driver hadn't asked for an address. He already knew. The hospital's fluorescent corridors felt even harsher after the club's amber warmth. Nana was sleeping when I arrived, her breathing shallow, her hand cool and papery in mine. The night nurse spoke in careful French about comfort measures and time, always that euphemism, time, as if what remained could be measured in hours like a shift schedule. I stayed until dawn, when Nana woke and smiled at me with recognition that felt more precious than diamonds. "You smell like rich people," she whispered in Polish, and despite everything, I almost laughed. When I finally left the hospital, the sunrise was anemic and cold. I pulled out the business card, studied the minimal design, Matteo Ravenna, Ravenna Group, an address in the financial district. 10 a.m. was 3 hours away. I had just enough time to go home, shower off the night's accumulated anxiety, and decide whether I was brave or foolish enough to show up. The building's lobby had the kind of quiet that money purchased. No echoes, no crowds, just marble and intention. Security waved me through after a phone call I couldn't hear, and an elevator carried me upward with the smooth certainty of engineering designed to never fail. The 10th floor was all glass and winter light. A woman with a tablet and an expression of professional warmth gestured me toward a seating area where the chairs probably cost more than my rent. "Mr. Ravenna will be with you shortly," she said. Her English was accentless, which meant she'd trained it to be. "Coffee? Tea?" "I'm fine, thank you." I wasn't fine. I was terrified and exhausted and confused about why a man who owned waterfront real estate wanted to see a part-time waitress with an overdrawn checking account. The possibilities my imagination offered were all either too optimistic or too dark. The door to the inner office opened. Matteo Ravenna looked exactly as dangerous in daylight as he had in amber shadow, perhaps more, because the sunlight revealed the calculation in his dark eyes and the precision of his posture. "Miss Kowalski, come in." His office overlooked the lake. I tried not to stare at the view, the art on the walls, the fresh coffee service on a side table. I tried to appear like someone who belonged in rooms like this. He gestured to a chair. I sat. He remained standing, which put me at a tactical disadvantage I suspected was intentional. "Your grandmother," he said, "stage 4. The bluntness should have offended me. Instead, it felt like relief, someone willing to name the truth without the soft focus language of hospitals. "Yes," I said. "How long?" "Weeks, maybe less." He nodded, processing information. "You're covering her care costs." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Some of it. There's insurance, but not enough. I'm working 3 jobs." I didn't mention the debt, the credit cards, the nightly calculations that never quite added up to solvency. "And when those weeks are over, you'll have debt and no degree, and 3 jobs that lead nowhere." Heat rose in my chest. "Is there a point to this, Mr. Ravenna?" Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe, or approval of the small rebellion. He moved to the side table, poured 2 cups of coffee with the ease of someone who'd learned service as a language of control. "I need a translator," he said, handing me a cup. "Polish primarily, some Russian if you have it." I have conversational Russian. The coffee was perfect. I resented that it was perfect. "I need someone fluent in both languages for meetings, document review, and occasional travel. The work is specialized, confidential, well compensated." "How well?" He named a figure, monthly. I nearly dropped the perfect coffee. That's no one pays that for translation. I do. He sat now across from me, and the shift in elevation made the space feel more like negotiation, less like interrogation. But the compensation reflects expectations. Discretion, absolute. Availability, priority. Loyalty, non-negotiable. Loyalty to what? To the work, to the privacy of the clients I deal with, to me. The office was very quiet. Outside, a helicopter crossed the lake, small and distant. What kind of clients? I asked. International business, import-export, real estate development, venture partnerships. All perfectly legal words that somehow suggested a world where legal was a matter of paperwork, not morality. And if I say no, then you say no. The driver will take you wherever you need to go and will part as politely as we met. He paused. Your grandmother's current care remains covered for the next month, regardless of your answer. Call it gratitude for 4 years of reliable service at my club. 4 years. I hadn't realized he knew how long I'd been invisible there. Why me? I asked. Because last night under pressure you forgot to perform, you became real, and because you didn't try to leverage my offer into something more. He set down his cup with a soft clink. You have 3 days to decide. My assistant will arrange a visit from a specialist, Swiss, very discreet, to consult on your grandmother's comfort care. No charge, no obligation. Consider it separate from the work offer. I should have asked more questions. I should have demanded details about the nature of these specialized translations. But the exhaustion of 4 years crystallized into a single, sharp understanding. I was drowning, and this man had thrown a rope. I'll think about it, I said. Good, he stood, signaling the end of the meeting. My assistant will provide contact information and the specialist's schedule. If you decide to accept, we'll begin with a trial week. If it's not a fit, you walk away with a severance. At the door, I paused. The coverage for Nana, you said it's separate from the offer. It is. Then why? For the first time, his expression softened into something almost human. Because some debts aren't transactional, they're inherited, and I pay mine. I didn't understand what he meant, not then. The driver, same sedan, same cologne-scented leather, took me back to my apartment in the industrial quarter where buildings still wore their factory bones. Nana would be released to hospice care tomorrow. The Swiss specialist was scheduled for this evening. I sat on my narrow bed and looked at my phone's calculator, running the numbers again and again. With that salary, I could cover Nana's care, my rent, and still have enough left over to save. Maybe even return to university, finish the degree I'd abandoned when she got sick. But the word loyalty echoed, and discretion, and the careful way he'd said specialized. My phone rang, unknown number. Miss Kowalski, this is Dr. Weber. I'm calling regarding your grandmother's case. I have an opening this evening if you're available. The specialist's voice was kind, German-accented, completely professional. We scheduled the consultation. I thanked him. He mentioned that Mr. Ravenna had provided comprehensive background files, which expedited the review. Background files, meaning Matteo Ravenna had known my grandmother's diagnosis, her treatment history, probably her prognosis before I'd ever walked into his office this morning. I should have felt violated. Instead, I felt seen. 3 days, he'd said. I knew I'd made my decision the moment I'd taken his card. The specialist arrived at the hospice facility with a medical bag and a tablet full of treatment options I'd never heard of. He examined Nana with gentle efficiency, asked questions in simple Polish he'd clearly practiced, and then sat with me in the small consulting room that smelled of antiseptic and resignation. The pain management protocol they have her on is adequate, but we can do better, Dr. Weber said. There's a palliative approach, not a cure, but it can extend comfortable time by weeks, possibly a few months. It requires medication that's not typically covered by standard insurance. How much? I asked, already doing math I couldn't afford. Mr. Ravenna has arranged coverage through a medical fund he maintains. If you accept, there's no cost to you. Why would he do that? Dr. Weber's smile was professional, unrevealing. I don't ask my benefactor's motivations, Miss Kowalski. I only implement care plans. Shall I proceed? I thought about loyalty, about debts that weren't transactional. Yes, I said, please. That night, I sent a message to the number on Matteo Ravenna's card. I accept the position. The reply came within minutes. Monday, 8 a.m., same address. Bring passport and university transcripts. Welcome aboard. Nana was asleep when I returned to her room. The nurse had administered the first dose of the new protocol, and already her breathing seemed easier, her expression less tight with suppressed pain. I held her hand and wondered what I'd just agreed to. Monday morning arrived dressed in frost and nerves. I'd chosen my best interview outfit, a navy dress that was respectable without trying to pretend I belonged in glass towers, and arrived 15 minutes early. The assistant from last week greeted me with a manila folder and a tablet. Contractor agreements, she explained. Standard NDA payment structure, emergency contact protocols. Review and sign, please. I read every word. The NDA was extensive, encompassing not just the work itself but the existence of the work, the identity of clients, the locations of meetings. Violation carried financial penalties that would bankrupt me and legal consequences that included potential prosecution under Swiss confidentiality laws. The compensation structure was exactly as Matteo had stated: monthly salary, performance bonuses, expense account for work-related costs. The emergency protocols listed a number to call, a hospital to use, an extraction procedure if I found myself in danger. Extraction procedure, from translation work. I signed anyway. Excellent, the assistant said, collecting the documents with brisk efficiency. Mr. Ravenna is in transit. He'll meet you at the car in 10 minutes. Your first assignment is in Milan, 2 days, return Wednesday. Accommodations arranged, wardrobe provided. Wardrobe. You'll be accompanying Mr. Ravenna to business dinners. Appearance matters in his world. She handed me a sleek black card. Expense account, active immediately. Use it for anything work-related. 10 minutes later, I was in the back of a different sedan, larger, more armored, with Matteo Ravenna across from me, reviewing something on his phone with the focused intensity of a man who treated time as ammunition. We're meeting with a development partner, he said without preamble. Polish national, Russian business interests. He speaks both, but he'll test your fluency. Don't embellish or soften anything he says. I need accurate translation, not diplomatic translation. Understood. Good. He looked up from his phone, and for the first time I saw him assess me the way a general might assess a new soldier, calculating capability, identifying weaknesses. You're nervous. Yes. That's honest. Stay honest. These men respect clarity more than charm. He pocketed his phone. We'll discuss protocols on the flight. For now, understand this. In my world, information is currency. You'll hear things that could be valuable to competitors, authorities, journalists. You'll be offered money for that information, sometimes overtly, sometimes through seemingly innocent questions. The answer is always no. And if someone doesn't accept no, then you tell me and I handle it. His tone suggested his handling would be thorough and unpleasant. You're under my protection now. That's not a metaphor. The private jet was smaller than I'd imagined from movies, elegant but functional, more boardroom than flying palace. Matteo worked through takeoff, signing documents his assistant handed him via some seamless relay system. I watched Geneva shrink below us and tried to remember how to breathe. Somewhere over the Alps, he closed his laptop and turned his attention fully to me. "Tell me about your grandmother," he said. The request surprised me. What about her? who she is, where she's from, why you're the one taking care of her. I hesitated, unsure of the relevance, but his expression suggested the question mattered, so I answered. She came to Switzerland in the 70s. Her husband, my grandfather, was involved in trade negotiations, some kind of business liaison. He died when I was young. Nana raised me after my parents passed in an accident. She worked as a seamstress, cleaned offices at night. She made sure I stayed in school, learned languages, had opportunities she never did. Your grandfather's name? Jan Kowalski, why? Something shifted in Mateo's expression, recognition, maybe, or calculation. That name means something in certain circles. Import-export, Eastern European connections. He was respected. I didn't know that. Nana never talks about his work. Probably wise. He studied me for a moment longer, then opened a leather portfolio and extracted a photograph, old, slightly faded, showing two men in suits standing in front of a warehouse. This is my father. Does the other man look familiar? I looked closer. The other man was younger in the photo, but the bone structure was unmistakable. That's my grandfather. They worked together, briefly in the late 70s. A logistics arrangement that ended badly, not their fault but caught in larger currents. Mateo returned the photo to the portfolio with careful precision. Your grandmother probably knows more than she said. Old loyalties, old debts. When she's ready to talk, I'd like to hear it. Is that why you hired me? Because of my grandfather? I hired you because you're competent and desperate in equal measure. The connection to your grandfather is, let's call it a fortunate coincidence that honors old obligations. He smiled slightly. Everything in my world connects eventually. Better to work with those connections than against them. The plane began its descent into Milan. I looked out at the Lombardy plains, sprawling and green, and tried to reconcile the image of my grandfather, the quiet man I barely remembered, with the implication that he'd been part of this world of logistics and obligations and men like Matteo Ravenna. One more thing, Matteo said as the seatbelt light chimed. Tonight's dinner will include my daughter. She's 6. She'll likely be there with her nanny for the first course, then excused. If she speaks to you, be kind but brief. She's learning to read people and she's better at it than most adults. A daughter, somehow I hadn't imagined him as a father. Will her mother be there? No, the single word carried enough finality to kill the subject. The car from the airport took us to a villa outside the city center, stone and terracotta, old money softened by climbing roses and manicured hedges. Staff materialized to handle luggage, and I was shown to a guest room that overlooked a garden where statues watched over gravel paths. The wardrobe the assistant had mentioned turned out to be a closet full of dresses in my exact size, shoes that fit perfectly, jewelry arranged in velvet-lined boxes. Everything was elegant without being flashy, the kind of wealth that whispered instead of shouted. I chose a midnight blue dress that felt like armor and reminded myself I was here to work, not to be dazzled. The dinner was held in the villa's formal dining room, all frescoed ceilings and candelabras that had probably witnessed centuries of deals and betrayals. The Polish businessman, Tomasz Kowalczyk, arrived with an entourage that included 2 men who wore their security roles like cologne, obvious and pervasive. But it was the little girl who captured my attention. She appeared in the doorway holding her nanny's hand, dark-haired and solemn in a white dress that made her look like a portrait come to life. Her eyes were her father's, dark, assessing, older than 6. Papa, she said, and Mateo's entire posture softened. Ania, come meet Miss Kowalski. She'll be working with me. Ania approached with the careful dignity of a child who'd learned early that behavior was currency. She offered me a small hand to shake. Pleased to meet you, she said in Italian. Likewise, I replied in the same language, and watched her eyes widen slightly. You speak Italian? A little, I'm still learning. Papa says learning languages is how we understand people. She glanced at her father, seeking approval, and he nodded. I'm learning French and English, and Polish because Nana speaks it. My heart contracted at the coincidence of the word. Nana, grandmother. That's wonderful, I said. Polish is a beautiful language. Will you teach me more? Ania asked. And before I could answer, her nanny gently intervened, murmuring about dinner schedules and bedtime. Later, Piccola, Matteo said, his voice gentle in a way I hadn't heard before. Behave for Nana. Ania nodded and allowed herself to be led away, but not before giving me one last measuring look that felt far too adult for a 6-year-old. The business dinner proceeded with the careful choreography of powerful men circling deals. I translated Kowalczyk's Polish, Matteo's Italian responses, the occasional Russian interjection from one of the security men. The conversation was ostensibly about property development, a resort complex on the Baltic coast, but the subtext was territory, control, and who owed what to whom. Around the third course, Kowalczyk leaned back and studied me with the frank assessment of a man who viewed people as assets. Ravenna, you've upgraded your staff, he said in Polish, clearly assuming I'd translate neutrally. I did, keeping my expression pleasant and blank. Matteo's response was Italian, measured. Miss Kowalski is exceptionally qualified. I value competence over decoration. Kowalczyk laughed. Competence is decoration if it's beautiful enough. Then, to me directly in Polish, tell me, Miss Kowalski, what does a woman like you think of men like us? The question was a test. I translated it for Matteo, then waited for his nod before responding in Polish. I think powerful men are like thunderstorms, impressive, dangerous, and best observed from appropriate shelter. Kowalczyk's laugh was genuine this time. Cautious and clever, you chose well, Matteo. The rest of the dinner blurred into wine and negotiation. By the time the guests departed, I was exhausted from the mental gymnastics of translation and the hypervigilance of being watched by men who viewed trust as a tactical error. Matteo walked me back toward the guest wing, his hand light and proprietary at the small of my back, a gesture I was beginning to recognize as his preferred method of guidance. You did well, he said. Kowalczyk respects you, which means he'll be less likely to test boundaries. Test how? He'll try to recruit you, offer you money for information about my operations, my partnerships, standard practice. Just remember what I told you. The answer is always no, and you report the attempt. We'd reached my door. The villa was quiet except for distant sounds of staff securing the grounds. Your daughter, I said, she seems too serious for her age, Matteo finished. She is. Her mother isn't in the picture by choice, and I've had to be careful about who enters her life. She's learned to evaluate people as a survival skill. He paused, and something complicated crossed his face. She liked you. That's rare. I liked her too. Good. He stepped back, creating professional distance again. Tomorrow we have meetings downtown. Breakfast at 7, departure at 8. Sleep well, Miss Kowalski. But sleep was difficult in a villa that whispered with old money and older secrets. I lay in the elegant bed and thought about my grandfather, about connections that survived decades, about a 6-year-old girl who'd learned to read danger before she'd learned to read cursive. And I thought about Matteo Ravenna's hand at my back, protection or possession. I couldn't yet tell. The week unfolded like a masterclass in controlled chaos. Meetings in Milan, a day trip to Turin for a property negotiation, late dinners where I translated conversations that danced around explicit details while making intentions crystal clear. I learned to read the room's temperature, to anticipate when Matteo needed exact translation versus contextual summary, to recognize which silences meant danger and which meant calculation. And through it all, there were small moments of unexpected gentleness. Matteo ordering my coffee exactly how I preferred it without asking. a cashmere wrap appearing in my room when the evenings turned cold, a call from Dr. Weber reporting that Nana was responding well to the new protocol, speaking more, even smiling. On the flight back to Geneva, Matteo broke his usual focused silence. "You'll move into the guest house on my property," he said, not quite making it a question. "It's secure, comfortable, and it puts you within immediate reach if I need you. Separate entrance, full privacy. Your grandmother's hospice facility is 10 minutes away." "That's not necessary. It's strategic. You're now associated with me in certain circles. That makes you a potential target for pressure or information gathering. The guest house has security that your current apartment lacks." "A target," I repeated, tasting the word's implications. "A precaution," he corrected. "You're valuable to me, which means protecting you protects my interests. Consider it part of the compensation package." The guest house turned out to be a small villa in its own right, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that gleamed with unused potential, windows overlooking the lake. It was more space than I'd had in years, and the silence was luxurious after the thin walls of my old apartment. I moved in over a weekend, my few possessions looking sparse in the generous rooms. The main house was visible through the trees, large enough to contain mysteries but close enough to feel like surveillance. That Sunday evening, I visited Nana at the hospice. She was sitting up, working on embroidery with steady hands, something I hadn't seen her do in months. "You look different," she said in Polish, studying me with the sharp attention that illness hadn't dulled. "Rested, fed, less hunted." "New job," I said, settling into the chair beside her bed. "Better pay, better hours." "What kind of job makes a girl look like she's dancing with wolves?" The metaphor was apt enough to make me pause. "Translation work. For a businessman, it's legitimate," I added, hearing the defensiveness in my own voice. "Legitimate," Nana repeated, and her smile was knowing. "Your grandfather used to say the same thing. Just business, Marta, just logistics." She set down her embroidery and took my hand. "Show me your employer's business card." I did, reluctantly. She studied Matteo's name with an expression I couldn't read. "Ravenna," she finally said. "I knew his father, Giacomo, good man, sharp mind, caught between honor and survival." She looked at me directly. "Be careful with the son, Sira. These men, they're not cruel, but they're absolute. When they protect completely. When they decide you're theirs, you belong to them in ways that feel like choice but aren't." "I can handle myself." "I'm sure you think you can." Her grip on my hand tightened with surprising strength. "But handling yourself and surviving their world are different skills. Remember, you can always walk away. Don't let comfort become a cage, even a gilded one." I wanted to protest, to insist I was just an employee, just a translator. But sitting in the hospice facility that Matteo's money had made comfortable, wearing clothes his expense account had purchased, living in his guest house, I could feel the golden bars already forming. Monday morning brought a new assignment, accompanying Matteo to a gallery opening in Geneva's Old Town. "Mostly social," he explained in the car. "But there will be people there I need to observe, and your presence gives me a reason to circulate without appearing to work. Dress for art and money." The dress I chose was black silk that moved like water, and I paired it with pearl earrings from the jewelry box that kept mysteriously replenishing itself. When I met Matteo at the main house, his appraisal was thorough and approving. "Perfect," he said. "You look like you belong." The gallery was all white walls and careful lighting, the kind of space where the air itself seemed expensive. Art collectors moved through the rooms with the predatory grace of people who viewed culture as investment portfolio. Matteo navigated the crowd with ease, his hand finding its familiar place at the small of my back. "There," he murmured, directing my attention to a man in a pale gray suit examining a sculpture. "Viktor Sokolov, Russian. Legitimate on paper, but he's been moving into territories that concern me. I need you to listen if he speaks Russian to his companions. Don't translate publicly, just remember. We drifted closer. Sokolov was holding court with two younger men, discussing the sculpture in Russian with the dismissive tone of someone who viewed art as status symbol rather than beauty. The Ravenna problem needs addressing, Sokolov said, his Russian crisp and Petersburg accented. He's too comfortable, too established. A reminder of vulnerability would be useful. Nothing crude, perhaps regulatory pressure or questions about his daughter's custody. My stomach went cold. I kept my expression neutral, admiring a nearby painting as if I hadn't understood every word. That's a bold play, one of the younger men replied in Russian. Ravenna has deep connections. Connections can be cut, especially if the authorities start asking uncomfortable questions about how he funds his lifestyle. Sokolov smiled at his own sculpture reflection. Sometimes the best weapon is a subpoena. We moved away before they could notice my attention. At the champagne table, I leaned close to Matteo and translated in a voice barely above a whisper. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture sharpened. "Good," he said quietly. "Very good. We'll leave in 10 minutes. Act normal." Normal meant smiling at artists, praising installations I barely processed, playing the role of cultured companion while my pulse hammered. When we finally reached the car, Matteo made a single phone call in rapid Italian, then turned to me. "You've just prevented significant trouble," he said. "Sokolov's been positioning for months, but I didn't know he'd go after Ania. Now I can prepare." "What will you do?" "Handle it." The words were calm, absolute, and somehow more frightening than anger would have been. "You won't be involved in that part, but you should know, by making yourself useful in my world, you've also made yourself a factor in it. People will notice you now, assess you, possibly target you as a pressure point against me. Should I be afraid?" He looked at me then, really looked, and his hand came up to cup my jaw, warm, possessive, achingly gentle. "No, because I protect what's mine." The kiss was inevitable and impossible. His mouth found mine with the same certainty he brought to every action, and for a moment, the back seat of the sedan became the entire universe. He tasted like champagne and danger, and when his hand slid into my hair, I forgot every warning Nana had given me. Then reality reasserted itself, and I pulled back. "This can't, we shouldn't." "I know," he said, but his hand stayed tangled in my hair. "I know all the reasons this is unwise. You work for me. The power dynamic is impossible. You're still learning what my world means." He released me slowly, deliberately. "But I'm not good at denying myself what I want, Sira, and I want you." "Want or need?" I asked, breathless. "Both." He sat back, creating physical distance that did nothing to reduce the charged space between us. "Think about it. Decide what you can accept. But understand that once we cross certain lines, there's no going back to pure professionalism." The guest house felt too empty that night. I stood at the window overlooking the lake and tried to untangle desire from pragmatism, attraction from self-preservation. Matteo Ravenna was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with his business connections and everything to do with how he made me feel, seen, valued, protected in ways that were simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Beautiful performance at the gallery. You're more valuable than you know. I pay better than Ravenna. Think about it." I screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Matteo's number, then blocked the sender. His reply came immediately. "Good instincts. That's Sokolov's pattern: recruit or intimidate. You're safe tonight. Security on the grounds has been increased. Sleep well." But sleep was elusive. I kept thinking about the kiss, about Sokolov's threat against Ania, about the way Matteo's world was becoming my world through a series of small choices that felt inevitable in the moment but irreversible in aggregate. Tuesday morning, Matteo appeared at my door with coffee and an apology in his eyes. Yesterday was inappropriate, he said, handing me the cup, perfect temperature, perfect ratio of cream to sugar. I overstepped. You're my employee and I put you in an uncomfortable position. What if I wasn't uncomfortable? His jaw tightened. Then we have a different problem. Do we? I challenged. You said I should decide what I can accept. I'm deciding. The kiss wasn't the problem, Mateo. The problem is everything else. The power dynamic, the danger, the way your world is swallowing mine piece by piece. But the attraction, that's actually the simplest part. He set down his own coffee with careful precision. You should know what you're considering. I'm not a good man, Sierra. I've done things that keep me awake at night. The business is mostly legitimate now, but it wasn't always, and the past doesn't disappear just because you rebrand. People I've worked with, decisions I've made, they have consequences that ripple forward. I'm not naive about who you are. Aren't you? He stepped closer, and the space between us felt electric. You see competence and care. You see a man who got your grandmother a specialist, who gives you security and respect. But there's a cost to that protection. There's a weight to being mine. Ask yourself if you're ready for that before you decide the attraction is simple. Then show me, I said. Show me what being yours means. The challenge hung in the air between us, dangerous and inevitable. His hand came up to cup my face again, thumb brushing my cheekbone with aching tenderness. Not yet, he said softly. Not until you've seen more. Not until you understand that choice means knowing all the exits and staying anyway. He stepped back, and the loss of his warmth felt like punishment. I need you to visit your grandmother today. Spend time with her. Ask her about my father, about the old days. She knows things that will help you understand what you're considering. And if what she tells me scares me away, then I lose something irreplaceable and you escape something dangerous. Either way, you'll have made an informed choice. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I hope you stay. Not for the work, I can hire translators. For this. For the possibility of something real in a life that's been strategy and survival for so long I'd forgotten what real felt like. Then he was gone, and I was left with cooling coffee, and a mission I wasn't sure I wanted to complete. Nana was sitting in her wheelchair by the window when I arrived, watching birds at a feeder someone had installed outside. The hospice had become comfortable, almost home-like, under Dr. Weber's care regime. You have questions, she said without turning around. I can feel them from here. I pulled a chair close and sat. Tell me about Giacomo Ravenna. She smiled, still watching the birds. Matteo sent you to me. Smart boy. Knows I'm the one who'll tell you the truth, even if it costs him what he wants. What does he want? You, obviously. She turned to face me now, her eyes still sharp despite illness. And not just for work, though you're excellent at that. He wants you because you're real in a world where everything is performance. You have no agenda except survival and love, survival for yourself, love for me. That's rare in his world, precious. Tell me about his father, I repeated. Giacomo was caught between two worlds, his family's old business and the changing Europe. Your grandfather was the same. They tried to build something new, something legitimate, using the networks they'd inherited. It almost worked. She paused, gathering memory. Then there was betrayal, not from them, but around them. People died. Your grandfather was killed. They called it an accident, but Marta knew better. Giacomo survived but lost everything. His wife, his business, nearly his life. He rebuilt from nothing, taught his son to be harder, smarter, more absolute. So Matteo inherited this world. He inherited the consequences, the connections, the debts, the reputation, and he spent 15 years trying to make it mean something other than violence and fear. She took my hand. He's a good man trapped in a bad structure, Sierra, but trapped is still trapped. If you go to him, you share that trap, beautiful, comfortable, protected, but still a trap. And if I walk away, then you're free and poor and probably filled with regret. She squeezed my hand. There's no perfect choice, my darling, only the one you can live with. But know this, Giacomo loved deeply and lost everything. I think Matteo is terrified of repeating that pattern, so he's built walls so high even he can't see over them. You'd be choosing to climb those walls, hoping there's something worth finding on the other side. I stayed with Nana through lunch, through her afternoon nap, through the sunset that painted the lake outside her window gold and rose. When I finally left, I had no more clarity than I'd arrived with, only the certainty that whatever choice I made would be irrevocable. The guest house was dark when I returned, but there was light in the main house. Through the windows, I could see Matteo in what looked like a study, head bent over papers, reading glasses making him look scholarly and almost vulnerable. I'd walked halfway across the lawn before I'd consciously decided to move. He looked up when I knocked, and something like relief crossed his face. "Come in." The study smelled like leather and old books, civilized things that contrasted with the tension in his shoulders. "What did she tell you?" "Everything." I closed the door behind me. "About your father, my grandfather, the betrayals and losses. About you being trapped in a structure you're trying to transform. And I'm still here." He removed his reading glasses, set them aside with careful precision. "Why?" "Because I'm already trapped, Matteo. By debt, by obligation, by loving someone who's dying and knowing I can't save her. Your trap comes with protection, purpose, and the possibility of something more than survival." I moved closer. "You told me to decide what I can accept. I can accept danger if it comes with honesty. I can accept being yours if it includes being my own. I can accept this world if you're willing to show me all of it, the beautiful and the brutal. And if the brutal breaks you, then I break knowing I chose it." I was close enough to touch him now. "Nana said your father loved deeply and lost everything, but he had love, he had something real. Isn't that worth the risk?" For a long moment he just looked at me, and I saw the war being fought behind his eyes, control versus desire, safety versus risk, walls versus windows. Then he stood and crossed the distance between us, and his kiss was answer and question and promise all at once. His hands framed my face like I was something precious and dangerous, and when I wound my arms around his neck, I felt the shudder of surrender that ran through him. "You're my weakness," he whispered against my mouth. "Everything I've built, all the control, you could destroy it all." "Then we're even," I said. "You could destroy me too." We stood there in his study, holding each other like survivors of separate disasters who'd found unexpected shelter, and I felt the last of my resistance dissolve into the dangerous certainty that I was choosing this, choosing him, choosing a life that would never be simple but might be real. "Stay," he said, not a command, a request. "Tonight, not for anything except this." I stayed. We talked through the night, trading histories and fears, laughing over absurdities, building the foundation of something neither of us could name yet but both desperately wanted. He told me about Ania's mother, a strategic marriage that had been cold from the start, ending badly when she'd chosen addiction over motherhood. I told him about my parents' death, about raising myself under Nana's exhausted love, about the scholarships I'd lost when she got sick. Dawn found us curled together on the study sofa, and when I woke, his hand was in my hair, his breath warm against my temple. "We're about to become complicated," he murmured. "We've been complicated since the moment you spoke Polish in a service corridor." His laugh was quiet and genuine, true, but now it's deliberate. The next weeks unfolded in a rhythm of work and stolen moments. Meetings in Zurich, dinners with associates where I translated subtext as much as language, late nights in Matteo's study where we planned strategy and built intimacy in equal measure. I learned the choreography of his world, when to be visible and when to disappear, how to read tension in a room, which silences meant danger. And through it all, Sokolov's shadow grew closer. It started small, a regulatory inquiry into Ravenna Group's property holdings, then questions about Ania's school enrollment, suggestions that her living situation needed review. Matteo handled each pressure with calm precision, but I could see the stress accumulating in the tightness of his jaw, the late nights where sleep eluded him. He's using legitimate channels as weapons, Matteo explained one evening, showing me the latest legal filing. Can't be traced back to him directly, but the pattern is obvious. He's trying to force me into a negotiation from a position of weakness. What kind of negotiation? Territory. He wants my Baltic coast connections, my Warsaw partnerships. He thinks threatening Ania will make me concede. His expression was cold with controlled fury. He's miscalculated. What will you do? Remove him as a threat. Legally, financially, there are ways to neutralize someone without violence, but it requires precision and patience. He pulled me close, his arms tight around me. Which means you and Ania need to be somewhere safe while I handle this. Somewhere Sokolov can't use you as leverage. I'm not leaving. Zira. No, I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. You said being yours meant sharing the weight. That includes the dangerous parts. I'm staying. What I saw in his face then was complicated. Frustration at my stubbornness, fear for my safety, and something deeper. Gratitude that I wasn't running, that I was choosing to stay even when staying was hard. Then we do this together, he finally said. But we're moving you and Ania to the Alpine property until this is resolved. It's secure, isolated, and staffed with people who have been with my family for years. Your grandmother, too, Dr. Weber, can provide care there. The Alpine property. Safe house technically, but it's comfortable, mountain views, clean air. Ania loves it there. He kissed my forehead. We leave tomorrow, pack for 2 weeks. The Alpine house clung to a mountainside like something from a fairy tale. Stone and timber, smoke rising from chimneys. Snow still clinging to the northern slopes despite spring's advancement. Inside, it was all warm wood and thick rugs, comfortable in a way that whispered wealth without shouting it. Ania arrived with her nanny and an expression of solemn understanding beyond her years. Papa says we're staying here for a while, she said to me in careful English, because bad people are trying to be difficult. That's right, I confirmed, but we'll be safe here. I know, Papa always keeps us safe. She hesitated, then added in a smaller voice, will you read to me later? Nana usually does, but her hands hurt today. My heart contracted, of course. The nanny, a woman named Rosa who'd been with the family since Matteo was a child, showed me to my room. Large windows overlooking the valley, a fireplace already laid with logs, fresh flowers that seemed absurdly optimistic given the circumstances. Nana arrived that afternoon via medical transport, Dr. Weber accompanying her to ensure the transition didn't compromise her care. She took one look at the Alpine house and laughed. Giacomo had a place like this, she said. His retreat when the world got too complicated. I came here once long ago. She looked at me with knowing eyes. History repeating itself, Sira. Try to write a better ending than they did. Matteo stayed for 2 days, ensuring security protocols, meeting with his head of operations, making calls that I wasn't privy to. Then he stood in the entry hall with his coat on, and his expression set in lines of grim determination. I need to go back to Geneva, he said. Handle things directly. I'll return in a week, maybe less, maybe more, depending on how Sokolov responds. Be careful. Always. He pulled me close and his kiss was fierce and desperate. Keep Ania close. Listen to Rosa. If anything feels wrong, there's a number by the phone, use it and people will come immediately. Matteo. I love you, he said, the words stark and unexpected in the quiet hall. I know it's too soon. I know the circumstances are impossible, but I need you to know. You're not strategy or convenience. You're the thing I didn't know I was missing until you appeared in my life looking cold and proud and perfect. I kissed him instead of answering, pouring everything I couldn't say into the pressure of my mouth against his, the desperate grip of my hands on his coat. When he left, the house felt larger and lonelier. The week unfolded in strange domesticity. I read to Anya every evening, fairy tales and adventure stories, her small body warm against my side, her questions insightful and sometimes heartbreaking. I sat with Nana in the afternoons, watching her embroider with increasingly unsteady hands, listening to stories about my grandfather that felt like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. And I waited for Mateo's calls. Brief, careful conversations where he told me everything was proceeding and nothing was resolved. On the 8th day, Anya woke me before dawn, standing beside my bed in her nightgown, her face pale in the early light. "Something's wrong," she whispered. I was instantly alert. "What do you mean?" "A car came, middle of the night. Rosa went downstairs and hasn't come back." Her voice was steady, controlled, a child who'd learned early that panic was dangerous. We should hide. The protocols Mateo had explained clicked into place. I took Anya's hand, grabbed my phone, and led her to Nana's room. She was already awake, her expression grimly knowing. "Trouble?" she asked in Polish. "Maybe. We're going to the safe room." I helped her into her wheelchair while Anya pressed the hidden panel in the closet, revealing a reinforced door behind the hanging coats. The safe room was small but well-equipped. Supplies, communication equipment, a panic button that would alert Mateo's security team. I got Nana settled, then pulled Anya onto my lap, feeling her small body tremble despite her brave face. "Did I do right?" she asked in a tiny voice. "Papa said if something felt wrong to get you." "You did perfectly." I pressed a kiss to her hair. "We're safe here, your papa will come." The phone system had a direct line to Mateo. I dialed, and he answered on the first ring. "Sierra, we're in the safe room. Anya says there was a car in the night and Rosa is missing." "I'm aware. The car was mine. I sent it to reinforce security." His voice was tight with tension. "But Sokolov moved faster than I expected. He has people at the base of the access road. You're secure where you are. The safe room can't be breached, but I can't get to you until I neutralize his positioning." "How long?" "Hours, maybe more. I'm sorry, Sierra. This is exactly what I wanted to prevent." Anya stirred against me. "Is that Papa? Can I talk to him?" I handed her the phone, watching as her small face transformed with relief at the sound of her father's voice. They spoke in rapid Italian, his end soothing, hers brave but cracking at the edges. When she returned the phone to me, Mateo's voice was rough. "Take care of them. I'm coming. I swear to you I'm coming." "I know, we'll be fine, just don't do anything stupid." His laugh was more growl than amusement. "Too late. I'm about to do something very stupid, but it will solve the Sokolov problem permanently." "Mateo, I love you. Tell Anya I love her. I'll see you both soon." The line went dead. I looked at Nana, who was watching me with ancient, understanding eyes. "He'll burn whatever he has to burn to keep you safe," she said quietly. "That's what Giacomo did for me once. That's what these men do. They choose one person to protect above all else, and they become absolutely ruthless in that protection." "Is that love or obsession?" "Yes," she said simply, "it's both, and you chose it knowing that." The hours dragged. Anya eventually fell asleep against my shoulder, exhausted by fear. Nana dozed in her wheelchair. I sat alert, phone in hand, listening to the silence of the safe room and trying not to imagine what Mateo was doing to solve the Sokolov problem. It was late afternoon when the all-clear code beeped on the safe room panel. I opened the door cautiously, and Rosa was there, older, tired, but smiling with relief. "It's over," she said. "Mr. Ravenna just called. Mr. Sokolov has been arrested, financial fraud, ties to sanctioned entities. Very sudden, very thorough. The authorities found evidence that couldn't be ignored. Evidence that suddenly appeared." Her smile was knowing. Evidence that was always there, just needed the right people to look in the right places. Mr. Ravenna has friends in useful positions. Matteo arrived at dusk, stepping out of the car looking like he'd aged years in days. Ania ran to him, and he caught her up, burying his face in her hair with the desperation of someone who'd thought they might never hold their child again. Then his eyes found mine over Ania's shoulder, and what I saw there was complicated. Relief, exhaustion, and something darker, the knowledge of what he'd done, what he'd become to keep us safe. That night, after Ania was in bed and Nana was sleeping and the house was quiet, Matteo and I sat by the fire in the main room. He'd showered but still looked hollowed out by stress and whatever moral calculations he'd made. "Tell me," I said. Sokolov had been sloppy, arrogant. He thought his connections made him untouchable, so he didn't cover his tracks well. I just compiled the evidence, handed it to the right people, and let the system work. He stared into the flames. "It's not the first time I've used legitimate channels as weapons. Won't be the last, but I don't enjoy it if that matters." "It matters." I took his hand, lacing our fingers together. "Did anyone get hurt?" "No, just arrested, accounts frozen, reputation destroyed. He'll spend years in legal battles even if he eventually wins. He'll never be a threat to Ania again." He turned to look at me. "Is that too much? Too ruthless? Is that the brutal part you said you could accept?" "Yes to all of it," I said honestly. "It's ruthless and calculated and absolutely what needed to happen. I'm not happy about it, but I'm not leaving either." Something in his expression cracked. Relief or gratitude or the simple human need to be accepted despite imperfection. He pulled me close, and we sat there by the fire, two people who'd chosen each other despite all the reasons it was complicated and dangerous and probably unwise. "What happens now?" I asked eventually. "Now we go back to Geneva. I consolidate things, restructure some partnerships, make it very clear that my family is off limits. The organization shifts further toward legitimate operations. I've been planning it for years, and this gives me the impetus to accelerate." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "And you and I figure out what this is, what we are, what we're building. Partners. Eventually, if you want that. If you can tolerate being with someone who occasionally has to be ruthless to protect what matters." He pulled back enough to meet my eyes. "I can't promise you simple, Sira, or safe, though I'll always try, but I can promise you honest, and present, and fiercely, absurdly committed to making this work." "Then that's what we'll be, honestly complicated." His laugh was soft and genuine, the first real joy I'd heard from him in days. We returned to Geneva 3 days later. Nana came too, installed in a suite in the main house where Dr. Weber could manage her care more closely. She was declining, we both knew it, but she was comfortable, surrounded by beauty, and she smiled every time Ania brought her new embroidery projects to admire. The news about Sokolov rippled through the circles Matteo moved in. Cautionary tale, demonstration of reach, reminder that certain lines shouldn't be crossed. I watched Matteo navigate the aftermath with careful diplomacy, shifting partnerships toward cleaner operations, distancing the organization from its more complicated past. And in the evenings, we built something that felt like a life. Dinners with Ania, where she taught me Italian words and I taught her Polish phrases. Quiet time with Nana, who told stories and asked pointed questions about my intentions. Late nights with Matteo in his study, working together on translations and strategies, the professional bleeding into personal until they were indistinguishable. One night, sorting through files for a property deal, I found the photograph again. His father and my grandfather, young men standing before a warehouse, the weight of future consequences not yet visible in their postures. "Nana says they tried to build something legitimate," I said, holding up the photo. "That they failed because the world they came from wouldn't let them leave cleanly." "They did fail," Matteo agreed, "but they taught us what not to do, how to build better foundations, how to protect the people you love without destroying yourself in the process." He took the photo, studied it. "I think they'd approve of this, of us continuing what they started but doing it differently." Honestly complicated. Honestly complicated, he confirmed and kissed me like a promise. Nana died on a Tuesday afternoon in early summer, with Ania reading to her in Polish and me holding her hand and Mateo standing respectful watch by the door. She went peacefully, with the grace she'd brought to every part of her difficult life. We buried her beside my grandfather in the small cemetery outside Geneva, and I stood between Mateo and Ania and let them hold me up when grief made my knees weak. That night Mateo found me in the guest house, still wearing my funeral clothes, staring at nothing. She told me once that being with you would be a trap, I said. Beautiful, comfortable, protected, but still a trap. Was she right? Partially. I looked at him, this man who'd somehow become my home. It's a trap I chose, that makes it different, that makes it mine. He knelt beside my chair, taking my hands. Marry me. The proposal was stark, unadorned, completely sincere. Why? I asked. Because you've seen all of me, the competent parts and the ruthless parts and the vulnerable parts, and you stayed. Because Ania loves you and you love her. Because I want to build a life that's about more than survival and strategy. Because grief is awful, but it's less awful when you're not alone. He paused. Because I love you, and I don't want there to be any doubt about your place in my life, in Ania's life, in this complicated world we're navigating together. Yes, I said, and started crying, grief and joy and relief and exhaustion all mixed together. Yes. The wedding was small, held in the Alpine house with Rosa officiating and Ania as a very serious flower girl. I wore a simple dress that Nana would have approved of. Mateo wore gray that made him look like the gentleman gangster he'd been trying to transcend. We promised each other honesty, partnership, and the courage to keep choosing love even when it was complicated. 5 years later, I stood in the same study where we'd first kissed, watching rain fall on Lake Geneva, thinking about circles and patterns and the strange trajectories of lives. Mateo came up behind me, arms circling my waist, chin resting on my shoulder. What are you thinking? That I should have been terrified that night. The night you first spoke Polish in the service corridor, I should have run. But you didn't. No, I walked straight into the storm. Any regrets? I turned in his arms, studying his face. Older now, lines of laughter mixing with lines of stress, but still the face I'd chosen. None. We're complicated and occasionally ruthless and probably too intense for most people to understand. But we're honest. We're real. And that's enough. Ania called from downstairs. 18 now, preparing to start university, brilliant and kind, and perfectly capable of handling the complicated legacy she'd inherited. She'd chosen international relations, determined to continue the work of transforming the organization's reach into something genuinely beneficial. We went down together, Mateo's hand warm in mine, and I thought about my younger self, cold, tired, invisible, standing outside the Belarive Club counting breath clouds. I thought about the trajectory that had brought me from that night to this life. And I was grateful for every complicated, dangerous, beautiful moment that had led me here. To warmth, to choice, to a home I'd built from storm and stone and stubborn love.